Now we're going to turn to Washington, where we have a new guest for the show, Paraag Shukla, who I've met recently. He's a senior research fellow at the Institute for the Study of War, and he's done a fact sheet on the Afghanistan war and where we are now 10 years later, particularly with regard to the Bonn conference, which is happening in Bonn, Germany, 10 years later. So, Mr. Shukla, what do you think we're doing in Afghanistan, and how is the war going?
I think that's a really interesting question, Katie. I think specifically in regards to the Bonn conference, I think you can sort of categorize that as a missed opportunity of sorts in this earlier this week, actually. I think it was a good opportunity for the U.S. and our international partners to really sit down with our Afghan government officials and really map out concrete, actionable steps taken towards transition in 2014. And I think 10 years down the line, the event was to take stock of what we had done and what's left to be done. And I think that there were really an opportunity there to work with our regional players as well to make out that list, and unfortunately we did not do that in any concrete fashion.
Now, my old boss, Henry Kissinger, and a guy who certainly understands wars that are unpopular and don't go to a successful conclusion like the Vietnam War, he said that the only way he sees out of the Afghanistan war is for all the countries in the region to get together and everybody who's got a stake in this and try to come to some conclusion. So wasn't that what the Bonn conference was supposed to do?
Yes. Initially, when it was first planned out, I think our hopes were to really have that platform to sort of work through some of these issues and really come up with a way forward for the peace negotiations with insurgent groups and try to bring stability to the country. Now, because of a number of events over the past year, one prominent example being the assassination of former President Rabbani, who's the Afghan government's chief negotiator, I think peace talks were really put on hold, and President Karzai was very vocal in insisting that, until the Taliban can come forward with a credible group to negotiate, that, peace talks were, in effect, pointless.
Where are we now with the Pakistani-U.S. relationship going from bad to much worse, and the Pakistanis closing off our supply routes through Pakistan into Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, I think it's currently in a phase that it's never really been in. And it's extremely tense relationship already. And as you mentioned, with the supply routes and them also boycotting the Bonn conference, tensions are uncharacteristically high. And I think the only way forward is really to mutually assure not only Pakistan but India of really U.S. plans to stabilize the region and take a regional approach with all of our international partners and not just one particular country.
So where are we 2 years from now?
I'm sorry?
Where are we going to be? Yeah, 2 years. Let's put the calendar ahead 2 years. It's 2013. The United States is getting ready to pull out of Afghanistan. What does that situation look like?
Yeah, I actually just want to point out one thing. I think it's a very common misconception that the U.S. forces are going to be completely withdrawn by the end of 2014. And actually, the way it's really been characterized and agreed upon with the Afghan government from the Lisbon conference onward is that the U.S. is just going to cease its combat role and draw down significant numbers of combat troops. But we're still going to be there in a significant presence as advisors and mentors that are closely not only embedded with the Afghan military and police, but with the government on the civilian side. So I think, 2 years onwards, I think it's going to be an interesting sort of situation to see how the Afghan government is really able to operate on a day-to-day basis. And that includes ministries like Defense, Interior, Finance, etc. But that's also going to rely on continued close partnership and mentorship from the U.S. and international partners.
Okay, now we're talking to Paraag Shukla from the Institute for the Study of War. What do you make of all of the recent, like you talked about the assassination of the former Prime Minister Rabbani, former President Rabbani. We've seen in the last 48 hours there have been bombings in several cities in Afghanistan. It looks like the domestic violence is on the uptick. Assassinations, civilian targets being, gone after. What are you making of all this?
Yeah, I think once again, you have to sort of take that in context, I believe. I think the idea of our uptick in operations as well is going to cause insurgent groups throughout the country to really push up their own operations. And I think the recent attacks, yesterday being an example, and even the past couple months, really reflects the insurgent tactics to show instability in the country. And it's really not difficult to do that. They just have to conduct one or two spectacular attacks and really force forward that perception that ANSF, or Afghan National Security Forces, are really unable to maintain security. So in terms of their operations, we also typically see an uptick in insurgent activity prior to the winter season. And you know, if we sort of continue our pace of operations as we did last year, we will likely continue that through the cold winter months.
Now, we've all seen in the last 48 hours a story of a drone, a spy aircraft that was supposed to be in western Afghanistan and somehow has ended up in Iran. Do you know anything about that? Can you shed any light on the drone?
Right. Well, see, right now, as sort of the reports are coming in, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of conflicting reporting as well in regards specifically to that drone. So I can't really speak to that in any level of detail that's credible right now. I mean, all that the reporting that I've seen personally is that there is some sort of drone that the Iranians are saying they were able to acquire, reportedly in large enough pieces. But further than that, I can't really comment on that.
Okay, well, Paraag Shukla, from the Institute for the Study of War, if you had to say what is the big change in the last year in the war in Afghanistan, what would it be?
If I had to choose one, I would probably say the pressure that we've been able to put on insurgent groups operating, particularly in the south of the country. I think over the last, maybe pushing it a little bit more than a year, so about 15 to 18 months, with the surge of Army and Marine personnel into RC Southwest and RC South, Kandahar and Helmand in particular, we were really able to increase our pace of operations and really take a lot of that strategic terrain, which historically has been owned by the Taliban, and we were able to actually physically push them out and actually stay there through the winter and through the spring and summer of this past year. So I think one of the biggest changes is that when we have that combat power and the manpower in these areas properly supplied and with the mandate to be able to push to engage with insurgent forces, we've actually been able to have a pretty significant impact on the battlefield.
Okay, well, Paraag Shukla from the Institute for the Study of War, thank you for the update on Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, KT.
Okay, now we do the last 2 minutes now. We're down to 2 minutes.